All right. I'm very excited about today's show. We're live on Growth Monday. And, it's Monday, right? So lots of great things about being here on a Monday. And I love Growth Monday. I always have great guests. And today is no exception. I have Miss Cassandra Govan. Now, am I saying that right? Is it Govan?
It is. That's correct.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so she's actually the founder and CEO of the genetic natural behavior consultant for DEMA Agency Consultants. So welcome to the show, Cassandra.
Thank you, Rollins. Thanks for having me.
And so today's kind of special. Absolutely, today's special because you're actually going to be coaching me. I took the profile that you sent me, and I
Okay.
found out what I was. And maybe you can kind of go over the different ones that there are out there. But we found out what I was, so we'll reveal that in just a few moments.
Okay.
But you're going to coach me through because we don't know this. We may have some blind spots that's somewhat of in the way of our success. We don't realize why. Why are we not connecting with certain people? Why are we not getting that deal? Why aren't we getting picked off the interviews that we have for the job? Whatever the case is, there may be some things that we just don't know. We just don't know what we don't know. So the reason why I wanted to bring you on, Cassandra, is to help us walk through that. And yeah, I'm going to be kind of your guinea pig today to show them live how you kind of go through this process with folks and perhaps help us to notice maybe there's some blind spots about ourselves that we can identify to help us have that growth that we're talking about here on Growth Monday. So definitely welcome. And tell us a little bit about, I'm curious though, what got you inspired to even get involved in something like this? Because this is, I know you have a different background. You were in fitness, you're an
Mhm.
entrepreneur, and now you're a consultant with genetic behavior. So I'd love to know, how did you kind of get into that, first of all?
All right, Rollins. So I'll give you the short story because there's two reasons why. So I owned a fitness business for about 20 years, and I couldn't figure out why myself as well as my clients could not sustain long-term weight loss. So we could lose it, we could get the results, but as far as keeping the results, it was very difficult. And that was frustrating because no one in the industry actually had the answer to the question. It was fad diets, it was, change how you eat, work out a lot, etc. But that wasn't necessarily to me the long-term goal. So after that searching, that was one thing. And then the second thing that I would say probably my marriage. I was going through a lot of issues in my marriage as well and couldn't figure out, despite things that I knew, based on our spiritual awareness, etc., that we should be doing, but couldn't really pinpoint some of the things that were causing us so much friction within the marriage. And what happened is a lady, she said that they help fathers to figure out why it is that their kids, how they set the tone for their kids. And she wanted me to test my husband and my son, but because I'm a skeptic, I wanted to see first what the test looked like on me. And after
Right.
I did it, that is when I made the connection between fitness and relationships and business and everything else, because I saw that anything we want to achieve in our life is actually tied to our genetics. And once I figured it was that, then pretty much I hit the floor running. I became interested and then I got into it full time.
Very interesting. Okay, now what? Let me ask you this though. Whenever you decided you were going to get into this, you said you were a skeptic. Whoever
Yeah.
you shared it with, did you also come across other people who are a little bit skeptical?
Oh, absolutely. So, because I've done it so many times now, I technically know the individuals who will gravitate to what I do versus the ones who actually would not. So, I just change how I message it so that I can get the skeptics as well as the individuals who are more trusting.
Ah, okay. Did you ever have someone who, let's say they were skeptical, but you weren't prepared for the skepticism? Like, for instance, they kind of, I guess it kind of surprised you that they were skeptical of this. Because I got to think there's some people out here watching right now. It's like, ooh, I don't know if I don't know what I think about this thing.
Yeah, you know what? The way it works, Rallis, is skepticism really comes from just not knowing and understanding. So I try to do a really good job of explaining to people what behavior actually is, because to tell you the truth, there's so many misconceptions about what it is. But I don't really know their skepticism until I get them to take the assessment. And then once they take the assessment,
Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Joanna's telling me something here. Go ahead, Joanne. Joanne, are you there?
hmm,
I'm not able to hear her. She's calling me, so she must be calling me for a reason.
Yeah, this is kind of weird because Amanda and I are checking, and then it's actually yes, yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We are they're already online on Restream, but we can't see it live on LinkedIn.
Ah. Well, first of all, I'm noticing in the event, it didn't have the right one highlighted on my end. So it's on the Healthcare Leadership Roundtable, which is a past event. So I'm going to save the change
On Vimeo.
on Restream because you have to change it on Restream. So hopefully we will be live. Okay, so those who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube, you got an extended intro, which was kind of awesome. Okay, and then so we should be getting up on LinkedIn here momentarily. Yes, we are on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. And those of you who are watching on YouTube and on Facebook, feel free and come over to LinkedIn if you want to actually get involved with some of the chatting and commenting,
Yes, there it goes.
because we're going to be looking out for all those. So that was a nice warm intro, but we're gonna go through that again, Cassandra. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's okay. It's okay.
But welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show. We're so glad you're here on Growth Monday. It's Monday again. We're so happy about Mondays. And one of the things I'm happy about with Mondays is this show right here. And I'm excited about the guest that I have on the show today. Her name is Cassandra Govan, and she's actually the founder and CEO of Dima Consultants. And one of the things that's kind of really unique about her organization is that she helps to folks to understand, like you and I, our genetic behavior. And the reason why that's important is we don't know it, but there could be some things that's stopping us from getting to the goals that we want, whether we're going to get picked for that interview, if we're going to get picked for that next promotion, if we're in sales, if we're getting that next deal, whatever the case is, there may be some things that's stopping us and we're not aware what those things are. And the reason why I asked Cassandra to be on the show is to help those of you in our audience, as well as myself, to identify what those potential blind spots may be. And so that's, you guys know this show is all about growth. So one of the things that sometimes can inhibit our growth is just not knowing this information. So that's why I wanted to have Cassandra on the show. So without further ado, welcome Miss Cassandra Govan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rallis. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you. Yeah, one of the things too that we that I wanted to cover today is, of course, by the way, folks, we're going to reveal what mine is because I did take the profile. She sent it to me. I was able to take it last night and give her the results. We're probably going to go over all the different features of, not features, but the different types that are out there, and maybe kind of give somewhat of an idea of what are those potential blind spots of those different areas. And I want you guys to let me know in the comments, especially if someone's already taken this. If you've already worked with Dima, I would love for you to pipe in and put what yours is, if you don't mind sharing it. But let us know where you're signing in from, what city, what state, what country, and we'll get right into it. So, we got Enrique is already here. Hey, right back at you. And of course, Joanne, Nicole is here from Illinois. And I know Enrique. I believe Enrique. I think he's from. I think he's in Hawaii. I believe. So, welcome to the show, everyone. I want to know, first of all, Cassandra, what was the big driving factor that got you interested in this? Because you came from a different background. You were in fitness, you were in nutrition, you were an entrepreneur, but you certainly weren't into looking into genetic behavior. So how did you get into that?
So I'll give you the short story. I have a background, of course, in fitness and nutrition. So I did transformations for clients and competitions. And what happened is I recognize a lot of individuals will come through my business and they would want the results, they would attain the results, but the issue was being able to sustain them long term. And I was no exception to the rule. I've competed in bodybuilding competitions and I also could not keep the results long term. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing also would have been just having relationship issues in my own marriage, and trying to figure out or make a connection between what was going on, maybe between how we were communicating or how we were acting and why that technically didn't come across to both of us and how we couldn't yield to each other. So the way I got into it is being a skeptic. So my genetic natural behavior is one of skepticism. And someone was talking about how fathers technically paved the way for their families. And in order to figure this out, the fathers needed to take a test. What the issue was, I was not going to have my husband or my son take the test if I didn't know first what was in it. So after I took the test, it actually was a bunch of aha moments because literally in real time, probably 3 minutes, I realized all of my own behaviors that were affecting my relationship, as well as all the behaviors that I exhibited that affected why I couldn't get those long term results as far as fitness was concerned.
Interesting. Okay, so taking yourself as an example, because you said you're a skeptic.
Mhm.
Did that reveal itself, by the way, in your profile? When you did the profile, did it reveal that that's part of how you're made up too? You just naturally are kind of skeptical of things.
Absolutely, it did reveal that. But what's interesting about the profile that I want individuals to know is what it reveals first are your top two talents. So the top two behavioral strengths, which can become struggles when we don't manage them, that's what it shows. And skepticism was not my top. My top actually was being extremely take charge. And then my second one was being extremely creative. So, but skepticism was actually in my profile. It stuck out as well.
I'm seeing that you are definitely a take charge. You're definitely creative. So that is definitely right on that. And when I took mine, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's how I am. That's true. So I was able to kind of extrapolate that from it. And there's some other tests I've taken. Well, yeah, that makes sense. What do you think that kind of what do you think it is that most people don't realize when it comes to these types of behavior assessments, if you will, and in this particular, what's probably one of the things I'm missing? Because I know in the past for me, it's like, oh, I have to take this to get this job, or I have to take it for this reason, but it wasn't because I wanted to.
Okay.
So what are we missing for those who just haven't had a desire to do it?
So it's a couple of things that's missing. The biggest issue is that people confuse behavior with personality. Behavior is fixed, it does not change, but it's a strength. It only changes when we can't modify it and manage the strength. Personality is the persona or the mask that we show other people. It comes from learned experiences, education, values, beliefs. You're not born with a personality, but you are born with a behavior. And I think the problem is there are so many, over 3,000 personality tests, and people confuse them with behavior because they assume that when they interchange the words, that it's actually the same thing when it is not. So if you think about it like this, you cannot change your fingerprints, right? You guys, this is what we have. It identifies who we are. So if we die, those fingerprints can identify us. Same thing with the behavior. It's inherited and it's from age of birth to 3 years old. So whatever it is that whoever it is that you are around at that time in your life, that is when that behavior actually starts. So it's from industrial psychologists as well as clinical psychologists, etc., who discover it. Another thing that I think is very important for people to understand a differentiation is how we actually score and the importance of this. Most personality tests do not adhere to the standards that are set forth by educational and psychological testing. And as a result of that, you have to ask, well, who's actually validating this information? Is it internal or is someone external validating the information as well? And I think that if people can understand that they're different, then it makes it easier for you to understand what you're actually uncovering. You're not uncovering personality, you're uncovering inherited behavior from birth to 3 years old.
Ah, interesting. Okay, very good. This is cool. Now we've got quite a few folks who's come in. By the way, Enrique, he corrected me. Thank you, Enrique. He's from Orlando. I like Orlando. I
Hi,
like that
Enrique.
place. So he's coming from there, and we also have Nicole. She's from Illinois. Chandra, she's from Texas. Welcome, Chandra. She's actually HR director at Memorial Hermann. She's right in my backyard here in Houston. That's awesome. Glad
Welcome.
you're here. And Enrique called you Coach Cass.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. So Nicole says, I appreciate how our strengths can become our struggles if not managed properly. Did you have something you want to share on that?
Absolutely. So every behavior trait, because we get it at birth, no baby is born with anything bad, right? It's always going to be good. So when you think about that, that means it's the same thing for our behavioral traits. The ones that we inherit are always good. They only become bad when we don't know how to manage it. So a good example, I am take charge. Now, do people like take charge individuals in their business? Absolutely. We make some of the best leaders, not being biased. However, how can my being take charge affect a position in leadership? Well, can you imagine a leader that's a tyrant? That becomes my struggle because I do want to control it. I do want the authority. I do want to only rely on myself. So that would cause a lot of friction, which becomes a struggle. And that's one of the struggles that I actually had in my marriage that this helped me to reveal.
Ah, wow. You know what? I love that transparency. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. Thanks for doing that for us. By the way, Syed, he's coming from Iran. We got someone from Iran. Welcome to the show, Syed. Wow. Okay. So I'm gonna reveal mine, and you can kind of coach me through it. Use me as an example, so my
Okay.
audience can see, somewhat kind of how a coaching session would be.
Okay.
And If it's something just crazy personal that I don't want to share, I'll let you know. But most likely, pretty much anything I'm willing to share. Okay. All right. So
Uh,
I'm an engager. I came up as an engager. That's my
mhm.
profile. And what I got from it is I like to be collaborative. I don't like to work alone. I like to involve other people in decisions. And guess what? That is so true about me. It
Mhm.
did reveal that. So I'm ready. Go for it, Cassandra.
Okay, so I'm going to walk you through if we were doing something that's called a decode my behavior session. So a lot of times I just first want to ask when you took the assessment and you heard your behavior style in the video and you saw the results, it sounds like you agreed that yes, they are you.
Yes.
Okay. Now there are three different things that explains and talks more about you as an engager that all of you show. Number one, you're very outgoing, you're extremely expressive, and you are talkative. Would you say that you agree with those three for yourself?
Yes. Not only have I noticed that, but I've also been come to appreciate that by those around me as well.
Very good. That's nice to know because admittance is the first step. Understanding and admitting who you actually are. Now, you talked about it, and this is interesting because I want to say this too that's important. When you took the assessment and it decoded your genetic behavior, there are several things that I actually am able to learn about you. For instance, I was able to learn what your behavior style with is, which is an engager, and there are 10 of them. I also was able to learn your financial style. So I even know how you invest your money. I know if you like to save or spend. I know how financially, emotionally intelligent you are. Another thing that I know how you are in the workplace. So I can see what your employees see without you even telling me. I could have a conversation with them and they would say, yes, that's who I see in Rollins. Another thing, Rollins, that I see in you is I also see what type of job you should do. And what's interesting about you that I'll share later is how your genetic natural behavior is completely in alignment, even with what you do for a living. So kudos to you for picking your profession because you actually picked it based on who you are as a person. All right. How do you think about that?
And by the way, I stumbled into that too, by the way, but keep going.
Interesting. Oh, we have to talk
Yeah.
about that.
Hmm.
Okay. So, for you, yes, you do enjoy meeting new people. You like new situations. You're comfortable in new environments, and you're a promoter. So, when we even think about what you do, Lab with Rollins, how you talk about the growth of individuals, that is you promoting and being a cheerleader for other individuals to grow, and that's actually in alignment with your behavior. Now, some things that you actually want. Now, this is important for when we want to, like for me, if I wanted to do business with you or sell something to you, I need to know, well, what would Rollins actually want in the transaction? Well, it has to be exciting, has to have be innovative, and you want stuff that produces above average results, right? Because that helps you to reach your lifestyle goals. So as a person, it shows me that you are interested too in lifestyle. That's something that's important to you as an engager. All right.
Yeah.
When it sounds good. Okay. Now let's talk about some fears. Now, these are general fears to engagers as a person. I actually didn't run your report to see your specific fears, but I technically can see that as well. But for engagers in general, you all don't like a loss of respect or being embarrassed. And you also don't like to have to settle for a lifestyle that's less than what your goal is. So that is something that you fear of having. So loss of respect or embarrassment, and then again, settling for a lifestyle that's less than what your goals call for.
Okay. I'm gonna validate that.
Okay.
Loss of respect is so high for me that I struggle when I get negative feedback of any sort. So if I
Uh-huh.
get negative feedback, like let's say a client is unhappy with something, maybe they're unhappy with a video or they're unhappy with a certain campaign or whatever, and I try and be as open as I can to those comments, and I'm nice with them when they give me I'm appreciative of the comments. But after that interaction is over, I beat myself up over and over again. I might lose sleep over. I'm trying to figure out, looking different angles. What can I have done differently? What can I do differently? I don't want to lose respect or lose reputation amongst whether it's peers, if it's a client, whatever it is. That's a big time driver for me.
Interesting. And
Um,
I could see that in your behavior. So not looking at your two primary traits, but I said in 3 minutes or less, right? I can figure out based on what you're saying, do I see it? So I'm looking, when you see me looking down, I'm actually looking at something that's called a factor report. It shows me all your behavior styles, and then it puts them in categories and breaks down like where you fall at in each one, how you actually scored. But you come up as a cooperative person because engagers are about relationships. So when you are about relationships, a lot of that can be about that validation, that acceptance from other individuals, being respected, making sure that you're on the right path, as far as meeting expectations, etc. So based on your genetic natural behavior, what you just said actually is in alignment with that one factor.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay, but before you keep going, I got some more. I got a couple more comments here.
Okay, sure.
And so Enrique says, "Control in right or left can make you go in circles." That's interesting. Okay, and then Nicole says, "Love the honesty." So I think she said that around the time when you talked about with your marriage, even, and I think that's because it's been there for a little bit. So I'm assuming that's what it is. So keep going with it. If you want to comment on that, or keep going with what you were doing, either way.
Okay, well, thank you for the comments and about the honesty. The control, definitely, like I said, my control comes up in various places in my behavior. So it's, trust me, something that I have a hard time myself dealing with. But I just put it out there and be transparent so that other people can learn, hey, it's okay. It's who you are. Just modify it. Same thing for you, Rollis, about your behavior. Okay.
Exactly.
So going on about you. So here is when it comes to how you actually make decisions. So you might waver between being emotional and rational, and you might actually make decisions before you understand the risk. But after you do that, you might panic later. So you may agree to the decision and possibly panic after making the decision. As an example.
Ooh, I've done that so often. Oh my goodness. I mean, almost like okay. There's this a funny skit in Will Ferrell's movie. It was called Anchorman, and I don't know if you have ever seen the movie, but anyway, this is there's the lady in the movie who was his love interest. They had already broken up. They were ex whatever. So anyway, he saw her in this thing of bears, right, where she might be attacked by a bear, and because he felt such affection for her, he went ahead and he wanted to jump in the cave in there to save her. And as soon as he came down, he's like, "Oh, I immediately regret this decision." And so sometimes I feel like that when a client or somebody or just someone in my life asks for something and I agree to it because I want to have that good relationship with them. I don't want to say no. And almost immediately after, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, what did I just accept?
Yep.
I think I'm in over my head.
Yep.
Not that I didn't want to do it for them, but it's just because we only have so much bandwidth, only have so much time, so much resources, and I have found myself accepting things that I really should not have accepted.
Makes sense. And again, remember I
Yeah.
told you about that commanding person, that person who's more cooperative, they are into people because you're a relationship builder. You fall on the side for people who want to build relationships. It is literally about working with other individuals and then kind of like giving in, pouring into them, and sometimes at the expense of yourself or at the expense of your time, your own relationships, etc. So being aware of that now that you know, Rollis, hey, this is not something you learned. What happened is it is you genetically, but over the time, because you continue to experience and do it, it just becomes even more hardwired and more ingrained in you. So technically speaking, it's like it's stomping something like down in the ground, right? It's you making your mark. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what you're doing to it the more you do it.
So, which is so true. So here's what I've done. This is what's helped me is I've put some people around me that help
Mhm.
me create some of those boundaries to
Mhm.
where before I say yes to something, I say, you know what, let me just check with my team first on this.
Good.
In this case, now I have a president, so I'm not even the president anymore. So I'm like,
Mhm.
let me check with our president before I can accept something like that and see what she thinks, or
Right.
let me check with my team. And so that helps me out a lot because when I have that conversation with them, I'm like, well, did you realize we're doing this and this, that? If we do that, that's going to affect this, and we don't have
Mhm.
enough resources for that. And so I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay,
Mhm.
so I have to go back and yeah, I can't do it. And a lot of times, even though I fear that telling them that I can't do it, a lot of times it's much easier than what I thought. I
It
mean,
is.
it's like there's like, okay, no problem, and they just move on. Whereas I had this big thing in my head about it.
I agree. And again, it's smart that you have a team because that is the reason why understanding behavior styles are so important in the workplace. Because if everyone thinks like Rollis, how are you all going to make decisions for your business? So understanding, right? Wallace is good at making these decisions. Put him with the relationship building and talking to the customers. Cassandra is extremely take charge. Don't put her there because she's about the results. Put her in the back. Let her do these types of things. Make the decisions that Wallace isn't making or can't make. Give it to Cassandra. So just understanding how to create that balance and symmetry in the business is where I think a lot of people are missing the mark, because again, they're using the wrong assessments to place people opposed to using the ones that places them exactly where they genetically need to be. All right.
So
Make sense?
true. Yeah, absolutely. Get some comments that come in here. Let's see.
Okay.
Enrique says, I've learned the power of no. And I think it was it Oprah who said this. Someone said that no is a complete sentence.
Sure is. Complete sentence to me.
Uh, what's that?
I said it's a complete sentence to me. I'm very good at saying no.
Yeah, you don't have a problem with that. I've struggled with that. Joshua says saying no is a heck of a drug.
Mm.
And so wow, so Joshua, you're apparently pretty comfortable with saying no. Apparently, tell us about that. Was that natural for you, or is that something you had to learn? Okay, then Nicole says good tip on setting boundaries that help you think before giving a response. Yeah, and with my wife, I learned this a long time ago. When I first got married, oh yeah, I'm making decisions. I'm the head of the house. So if somebody asks me something, I'll say yes or I'll say no. I'm the man in here. Well, we learned quite quickly that you don't do that in a marriage. You have to consult. Okay, so I ended up having, as we say in the South, eat a little crow. I might accept something that I shouldn't have accepted, and she gave me valid responses on why I should not have I should not have accepted that. Right. So. And it's helped me a lot. So I learned over the years, before I just jump and accept something, I say, you know what, that sounds great. Let me check with my wife and get back with you.
Mm-hmm.
Or let me just check. Let me just do some checking on that. I get back with you.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I tell you, it helps with peaceful relationships in a marriage, as well as in business. Right? If we can.
Absolutely.
So I had to learn that
Absolutely.
over time.
It's okay. All right. So you want to know what alienates you?
Okay. Yeah. Tell me.
Okay. So when you have to be forced to read detailed information or perform thorough research, you do not like that.
Oh yes,
Being
that's so true.
persuaded to lower your goals. So if people persuade you not to meet those goals and stuff that you have, you do not like that. And you also do not like products that don't live up to whatever the mentor or the person claims they can do. You don't like that.
That's true. That's
True?
true. If someone sends me this email or this article or something, and it's super long, it's hard for me to read it. Or actually, because I do this show, I have people who send me literally books. Okay, they send me books, and they don't know this, but it's just a weakness of mine that I have trouble like taking someone giving me this book, me taking that book and just sitting and reading it. Long piece of information. I struggle with that. It's just a struggle of mine. So and so it's seen as them doing a favor for me, but in some instances it can be a stressor because I don't know how to quite handle it because I have several, like I have like about 6 books in there that I've gotten recently that I have not had a chance to read yet. Maybe I've only read maybe a paragraph out of those things. Okay.
That makes
So
sense.
yeah, it's so true. Detailed information. Yeah, I struggle with this. By the way, Joshua says, I have kids whom I love dearly. If I can say no to them, everyone else is fair game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I
That's funny.
agree.
So, by the way, guys, if you have any questions while we're talking, feel free to ask questions. I don't want this session to be all about me. Reason why I'm being her guinea pig is so that y'all can learn how effective this tool is, so you to be able to identify blind spots. Because I know I've got blind spots, and she's helped me to kind of identify what those things are, as well as my strengths. I love the way you said that too. It focuses really on your strengths,
Okay.
and any strength can become a weakness if overdone. But helping us to identify those strengths is very important. Okay, let's keep going. Go ahead, Cassandra.
Okay, so it tells things for if I was your employer and I was dealing with you, or if you did this and you were talking to one of your employees, it tells you kind of like how you would actually want to challenge them as a person. So for you, because of what you said, it's better to encourage you to focus on just one goal at a time, opposed to having you look at 6 books at a time, right? Because the likelihood of you doing is not going to happen. So just having you really just zone in on that one challenge or that one goal or something that you want to achieve or overcome is actually allowing you to perform at your best and to use your behavioral strengths as that opposed to allowing them to become struggles for you.
Mm, like that. Okay.
Okay. All right.
And then you're gonna walk me through. It's okay to hit me with the negatives. Okay, it's okay.
Oh, oh, don't
It's not.
worry. They're coming. I'm not gonna spare your feelings.
All right, keep going. Then.
I'm like, yeah, you don't have to worry. I'm very good at what I do for. But here's the thing. I don't know your struggles. I'm going to tell
Okay.
you your strengths and I'm going to tell you what it looks like as a struggle. And you are going to identify yourself and say, oh, I
Okay.
realize now this is my issue. So my job is not to be like, well, you have this issue because that means I have to study you all day. I'm studying you just from what I see here.
Got
Okay.
it. Okay, it makes sense. Makes sense.
All
Okay,
right.
keep going.
Now, so we're going to talk about the report when normally I speak to people that I refer to. It's your work talents report. Now, you already kind of read what it showed that you are, and we discussed that. Let's talk about your two top talents or factors that drive pretty much, Rollins, every decision that you make in your life, except for your financial behaviors. Those are a little bit different when you look at them on paper. Now, tell everyone what are your top two talents out of the eight.
My top two talents. I don't have it in front of me. I have to look it up
Oh,
here.
okay. You see,
Um, I don't remember what those were. It was
I'll
something
tell you.
about. Okay, go ahead. Uh-huh.
Okay. So since you don't have it, Rollis's top two are spontaneous and outgoing. Now, a lot of times people look at spontaneous and outgoing. They can sometimes look at it as bad, but here is the way it is. So he's very free flowing. He looks at things from a high level approach and he's instinctive. Okay. Now, as far as his outgoingness is concerned, that's something that falls under how he is as far as people are concerned. He enjoys new ideas. He likes to express his views and he also loves a networking approach. Now, those are your strengths. Now, let's talk about how those strengths, Rollins, can become struggles. Now,
Okay.
I'm just gonna pull something. We're gonna talk about them one at a time because I want you to be able to ask questions. All right. So let me look at your report. Now,
And
let me
by the way,
explain.
before you get to that, I want to
Go ahead.
just can we quickly just run through what the personality types are? Because I'm an engager, so
Ah, okay.
we didn't cover that. I want to hear what the other ones are because as soon as you say it, maybe some might say, you know what, that does sound like me.
Okay. So if you want me to give you a description or are you saying you kind of just want to know? So here's how I say it. If you
Okay.
look at a pie chart and split it straight down the middle, right? And then you have results types of people on one side and then you have relationship individuals on the other. Now,
Okay.
when you think of relationships, it's two ways that we operate when we're concerned about relationships. Either we move very fast or we move carefully, slow. Now, on your side, you would be the individual who is on the relationship side, but you move fast. So everything that you do is more fast paced. Maybe how you make decisions is a little faster as a relationships person. So when you look at the top, like I said, to the right, the relationship side, we have an influencer who could be technically a combination of either a results person or the relationship side. They're on both. Okay. Then it's you as the engager. Then it's the community builder, the relationship builder, a facilitator, and then someone who's called an adapter. Now, the adapter, again, they can adapt on the results side or on the relationship side, depending on the situation. When you move to the results side, you have someone that's called, again, it could be the adapter, a stylish thinker, and a reflective thinker. And just so you know, since you're in healthcare, what I'm learning is most of healthcare individuals do fall on the side of reflective thinkers a lot. So, because they kind of do want to know more information. They're more about the research. They're more about planning things out, etc. Right? They're the science behind stuff. Then you have the strategist, the initiator, and like I said, that influencer who can fall between the results person or the relationships person. So you see, it's
Okay.
10 styles, and it just is determined on relationship versus results, fast versus slow. How you
That's
make
a lot.
decisions.
Now, while we're listening to this, if someone is in front of a desktop computer, is there a certain website they can pull up and just see all those? Like you got a certain spot on your site?
So I don't have it on my site. I mainly specifically talk about the styles, and I need
Okay.
to do better because usually I have people take the test and then it explains what their style is. And of
Got it.
course, when
Okay.
you work with businesses, Rollins, they run the report and see what the style is of all their employees and then kind of walk through that.
Right. Okay.
But
Yeah,
I'll put that
we
on my
keep
site.
going. That's fine.
Okay.
And by the way, before we keep going, I want to just it's water break time. So if you want to get a little water,
I'll have some
We do a
tea.
little water break halfway through. And if you're
Mhm.
watching, make sure you get some of your water.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Now let's talk about your spontaneous. And you can figure out, again, you don't have to say it. You can just listen and be like, okay, yeah, that definitely sounds like me. I want to explain something. Have you ever seen the bell curve? It's kind of like it has numbers on each
Yes.
side. Okay. With genetic behavior, we use the bell curve. So it starts at the number 20 and it goes all the way up to the number 80. And what happens is anything that's between 40 and 60, that's a behavior, means that it's easier to modify it. It's not as hardwired. When it
Ah, okay.
Right. When those numbers fall under 40 or go over 60, that is when in a company it's very difficult to modify that behavior of that person. At that
Okay.
time, as Rollis, when you have to say, okay, either I can deal with Rollis and his crazy, outgoing, spontaneous self, or we need to put him somewhere else. And that's just how it works, right? Now, remember, I told you 40 to 60 is normal. So let's just talk about how your scores look. So
Okay.
under spontaneous Rollins, your average score technically is a 32, which means, oh, the likelihood of changing Rollins and making him not be spontaneous and Mr. Planned, it's not going to happen. Now, yeah, it's not. There is nothing about you that shows that you schedule, persistent, or accurate necessarily genetically.
Okay. That's probably
Now,
true.
this is important to know because when you are under stress or pressure, that's when these genetic traits show the most. So that you can fake it till you make it, but when your butt get under stress and pressure, what people are gonna see is, yep, Rollis is spontaneous. That's who they're going to see. Okay,
Yeah,
all
that's
right.
true. You know what?
Now, go ahead.
I'm gonna validate that for a second. With my
Okay,
show, okay, with my show in particular, I don't prepare a bunch of questions. I like to be in the moment and have a natural conversation like we're having right now. But
okay.
for some guests, that unnerves them because they want to know what are all the questions you're going to ask me. So what I'll do is spontaneously, while they ask me, I will come up with questions, type in, and send it to them. That's just
Okay,
how
see,
spontaneous I am. But just my show in itself is very natural and organic. I mean, there may be a certain topic we're going to discuss, but it's not going to be like question, 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 question. It just doesn't flow with my personality. So yeah, keep going. I like it.
that shows. Okay, so it's three things that we break your being spontaneous down into. So it's a generalist, an improviser, and then someone who's instinctive. So I'm going to tell you the strength, a few strengths and struggles of each one, and you just say, yeah, I'm more of the struggle or I'm more of the strength. You pick. Okay,
And you
so
know what? But as you're doing this, I want
all
the audience to participate. I want you
right,
to let me know what you think. And you can let me know what you think about what she says about me, because maybe some of you know me or you watch my shows, or if you want to reveal something about yourself, if it resonates with you. I want to see that as well. Keep going, Cassandra. Sorry.
all right, so we're going to start with the behavior factor of being spontaneous. Three things underneath. So, number one, as a generalist, you like things high level, you can make broad assessments, and you can give an estimate quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the struggle though, you might be too vague. You may overlook important facts to reach a quick conclusion, or you just might miss the important details. So when you think of being spontaneous for everyone in the audience, are you more of the person who shows the strength, or do you think you show more of the struggle if you're
Ah,
spontaneous?
that's a good one. I like that. I want to see what they say. Now, just to validate what you're saying, that's why I have team members around me that do research those particulars, right?
Mhm.
So I can come up with a an overall assessment, an overall gut, just based on my past experiences, and it's going to be probably 80% accurate. But there's that 20% that can be a killer, or it might be a 10% that can be a killer. And so I do have members of my team that can go back and validate the information, and we can check the numbers. So
Okay.
if I try to do this business as a solo practitioner, I would be making a whole lot of more mistakes for sure.
I believe it. I totally believe it.
And by the way,
Okay.
Joanne, she just put in your link, demoagency.com, so
Oh,
folks can look
perfect.
at that.
Thank you,
Yep, keep going.
Joanne. Okay, so it's again in the 30s. So every single thing under spontaneous for you, you scored in the 30s, so less than 40.
Okay.
Now, it also says that you're an improviser. So the strength is you're very adaptable. You can respond on the spot. You don't have to plan right or prepare. You also are spontaneous, and then when necessary, improvise. Now, the struggle is you lack focus or structure. You could jump from one idea to the other, and then you may be unprepared. So now I don't want you to only think in work, think in your life, because remember how we are in our job. That's a career in business. That's one of the key areas. You also have your relationships, your health, your money, your community, and then recreation. So when you think of showing up, it's not just how do I show up at work, but how do I show up in my life as far as being
Yeah.
spontaneous. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Those are those
So
are those are real struggles sometimes, um, because I'm so used to doing things on the fly. There is a lack of desire to do a ton of preparation.
mhm,
So yeah, I definitely see that. Bob, we got a couple of comments came in. Joshua
okay.
Gilbert, he says that you're great at piggybacking during a conversation. Well, thank you for that, Joshua. Appreciate that. And then Nicole, she says, I was curious how genetic behavior test is different from the DISC assessment that my company uses. What I think I understand is that this test focuses on my fixed behaviors that develop from birth. The DISC is more personality type. I definitely want to learn more about myself using this tool. Okay, so yeah,
Mhm.
that's a great question. How does
Okay.
this differ, Cassandra, from the DISC?
Okay.
And by the way, can
So
you, as you answer, can you explain? Because not everybody know what DISC is. So can you
right now, here's the
explain?
thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know about a lot of personality tests. And the reason why is because this is like my approach. And I think why I like genetic behavior instead. There's over 3,000 tests. So people always like refer to the ones that they look at the best. But this is how I do it. I say, okay, based on the testing standards, the benchmark standards for educational and psychological testing, who meets the mark based on their requirements? Because at the end of the day, if it's 3,000, I don't have time to pick, is it Myers Briggs, Gallup,
Mm,
Enneagram, because none of them are it. There is only one other test that actually does genetic natural behavior. They cannot do financial behavior. The difference is the scoring. Now, I'm going to give you an example. If I said, I want to lose weight, I'm looking in the mirror and I hate how I look. So when I get in that mirror, Rollis, if I had to
mhm.
rate myself from 1 to 5, I want to lose weight. What rate do you think I'm going to give myself? Is 1 is poor and 5 is excellent. How would I say I looked at that time?
Well, you would say it's a one because you want to work on it.
There you go. Now, let's say in 6 months, if I got my results, how would I rate myself 6 months later?
You'd say five.
There you go. That is how people need to look at personality tests. If a person is asked, first of all, it's situational personality test. They give you a rate from 1 to 5, rate yourself. Who's doing the rating? I'm biased. My thinking is flawed. So, how am I actually rating myself on those tests? So, we use something that's called more forced choice scoring. Regardless, you saw it's only two answers, most or least. There's no most like, somewhat like, poor. None of that exists. So when you take out the bias of the test, it allows the person to provide raw data. And that is what most
Mm.
behavior tests don't provide. So, yeah, I know a little bit about Cassandra, but guess what? If I want to be confident and you ask me how confident am I, I'm going to say very confident, even though I know I'm not confident because I'm biased to myself.
Mm.
Right. So
That's a good point.
personality tests are designed like that. And companies use them to say, oh, Rollis is the take charge person. He's the perfect hire. Yeah, it looks like that based on paper because Rollis wants to present himself like that to you. And you can pass those tests with flying colors because, again, because of how they're designed.
Yeah.
And the second thing is you all need to look at who validates the test. If it is internal, or they say, hey, you know what, we had 100,000 people take the test. So based on that, that validates the information. That is not validation. Our tests are validated to this day still by Georgia Tech. Every single time they look at the test to make sure that the information is right. And our results are minimum 91% accurate. So it's not someone internal saying, oh,
Ooh.
the data is correct and it meets up. We don't have that. Someone from the outside validates our information. And again, most companies do not adhere to the test and benchmarks. So that is the reason why companies, if they don't do that, throw them out the door because the reality of it, you're not really getting the person who you think you're hiring anyway. 14% in interviews hire the right candidate. I'm just saying.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So this Nicole, she gave a response back. I think it's similar to the rest of my audience, but I'm just going to check in really quickly. She says, see, so you see my audience likes you. She says, great explanation. appreciate the clarity on the difference. And I'll just briefly, because I've Nicole, like you, my one of my employers asked me to do the disc, and for those who aren't familiar with it, it's you got four categories: dominant, influential, stable. I believe is the third one, and fourth I believe is compliance or consistency, something like that. And so I'm an I. I'm an influence. I try and influence others, and it puts me in this bucket. So it lets me know who I am. But what I didn't get from that test, and what you're talking about, yes, it has the more likely, less likely, and all that stuff. But also, it doesn't tell me which one of those features or qualities I have that are more likely I'm able to actually adjust or modify or change.
Mhm.
That's a new concept. I haven't come across that. That's another difference that I've noticed in taking both of them.
Mhm. And that's actually, I get that from a lot people who take majority of them is, oh, I can see all my strengths or my talents or this, but I don't see that. What are those weaknesses? What are my biases? Because I can even show you your biases. I literally, we can see it all. And again, we're the
Really?
only company in the world who can detect genetic financial behavior. No other company in the world
Okay.
can do
Tell me tell me about this financial part. I'm curious about the financial part. But before you tell me
it.
that,
Okay.
I have a fun question for you, and I
Sure.
want everyone in the audience to answer this. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, what's the next fashion trend you'd like to see? You can bring back an old one if you want,
Next, oh my goodness, next fashion trend I'd like to see. Oh my goodness. That's
and you
a
can
good,
either do that one, or I can give you a choice if that's too hard. I can give you another
yeah,
one.
give me a choice.
Okay. Um, Give me an example of a bad experience that turned out for the best.
A bad experience that turned out for the best. Heck, my marriage. There was a part where
Really?
that was like, oh man. I'll just say it like this. It's so funny. My husband and I met each other at 16 and 18, and I ended up getting pregnant. Bad experience, right? But guess what? I told him, like, hey, you know what? I'm not about to be a girl that's having another baby and I'm not married, etc. So that week he was like, okay, he proposed. We got married and still married to this day.
Wow.
So bad experience turned out for the best.
I like that. That was you look and as much as I see you guys traveling and doing stuff together, I was like, man, I like how y'all keeping it tight. You know, you're keeping it tight. I love it.
Yep.
So those in the comments, let me know. Give me an example of a bad experience that turned out to end up being a great one, or you can give us your next best. What do you think is the next best fashion trend? What it should be? Okay, keep on with what you were doing.
All right. So the last thing that we talked about was your instinctive, which is another part of your being spontaneous. So you're intuitive, you can react very quickly, you don't rely on reasoning so much, and you're really perceptive. The struggle though is you can be extremely impulsive, you might ignore the rules, you don't follow methods, you might be too informal in your life, or you can appear to be chaotic.
Okay, now here's the one. Everything I've heard today, I've pretty much been in line with. There's one difference I have.
Okay.
I'm very big on compliance or rules that I'm already familiar with. Right.
Oh,
So,
okay.
for instance, with my faith. Right. There's certain things I've learned through
Mhm.
my faith, through my reading of the Bible, and that sort of thing, and they're just non-negotiable. So, I mean, even though I may have been unprepared for that situation, I do have some guidelines where I know what decision I can make in that moment. And where I
Mhm.
think it relates to business is when it comes to values, trust, honesty,
Mhm.
integrity, diligence, all those sort of things that kind of build up my fabric. I am very compliance driven. And if I know that there are certain rules or regulations, even in the business standpoint, that I'm not supposed to cross those lines or break those rules,
Mhm.
I'm very, very compliant. Whereas you have some folks who's like, yeah, let's kind of bend it, or that's not that big a deal to me, or I don't like it, so I'm not going to follow it, or whatever the case is. So I don't know. Does that sound like it kind of differs a little bit from what you read?
So remember this, it's genetic behavior, but we all have learned behaviors. So even though,
Mm.
so it doesn't mean that you don't show something different. Like I like to use this as an example because I'm so take charge and self-reliant. I don't like to depend or ask other people for stuff, but I own a business. So that's a requirement, right? To make money, etc. So even though it's not me genetically, I still know how to do it.
Ah. Okay, thanks for making that distinction. I like that.
Okay,
Okay, you're
yeah.
right. So again, that's something that's learned behavior for me because if it was up to me, I probably would have made my genetic decision. But because I've decided to ascribe to these certain compliance rules or whatever, I decide to make a different decision. So I like that. Thanks for explaining that. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. So you learned how to make decisions different. You learned how to not
Yeah.
be so spontaneous, but to follow and adhere to rules. It's necessary, right?
I also want to ask those in the
Yeah.
audience who are watching.
Mhm.
Have you had an experience like that where you've got a certain leaning, but you've made a different decision because of what you've learned about yourself? You decided to go a different direction. I would love to see that in the comments as to what you think. In fact, Nicole just said, "Agree that you must have a standard you follow that guides you in all aspects of life." Thank you for that, Nicole. Appreciate it. All right, keep going, Cassandra. Sorry.
Mhm. And just remember, so it's still a strength. So even if you are instinctive, you still can go into your intuition to say, which can be guided based on right our value system, beliefs that we have. You said you followed Bible principle. Based on that, you can still respond to situations, still using those. I can quickly respond and do all those other things because those things have technically molded your conscience of how you make decisions, which means it's still acceptable. It doesn't mean you just don't make them in a spontaneous manner.
Ah, got it. Okay, makes sense. Okay,
Okay. All right.
I'm
Now,
with you.
okay, okay, so let's just quickly talk about outgoing because I think you already know you're pretty outgoing. I'm going, you wouldn't do all of these shows and all of this other type of stuff if you were not. I just don't can't possibly see how you'd be able to have enough reflection time, etc., doing this if you didn't have an outgoing personality.
Yeah, and okay, I want something else you read earlier. I want to also validate it. You
Okay.
talked about change, like to change things a lot. Okay,
Mhm.
earlier in my career as a manager, I wasn't as aware of it. I just thought everybody liked to change. Since I like to change, everybody like to change, right? So I would be changing stuff with my staff all the time, and it was extremely frustrating for certain people on my team. Certain people who were like me, they loved it. Other people on my team who liked the more of a kind of a stable environment. We don't want to change a lot of stuff. I didn't know, but I was upsetting their apple cart. I was moving their cheese left and right, and I was definitely frustrating them. But I learned through time that okay, you can't either you need to slow the changes down, or you need to get a little bit more buy-in before you make that next change. Make sure it's thought out a little bit more. Don't just. So I still struggle with it, but I have been able to alter my genetic behavior a bit here and there, and that has helped a lot when it comes to my business and my team and that sort of thing. So, but you're right. It's hardwired in there, and I have to fight against it. I like to keep changing stuff.
Guess what, Rollins? Here's what this is going to be a shocker. Now, just completely off the two traits we talking about. Your creative trait is also high. So that is a lot of change because creative brains, you're always consistently changing things or creating things. So you have this high spontaneous behavior, but you also have a high creative behavior. So you like have the best of both worlds to an extent, but that's also it can be very difficult for people who are anchor thinkers as well as people who are planned. They like planned as a structure opposed to spontaneous things changing.
Yes, absolutely. I got another comment came in.
Okay.
So Syed from Iran, appreciate you, Syed. He says, unfortunately, the coronavirus and the post-corona epidemic have taken out life out of the ordinary. I think obsession, fear, worry, and sadness have unfortunately affected all our thoughts, actions, and behaviors.
Hmm.
Okay, and then Joshua, he says, what I have found is that chaos leads to opportunity. The pandemic was horrible for many, but for us, it has led to a different business model for and many fun things to come.
Mhm.
So I see two different ways of looking at the same situation just in those two comments. Thank you for both those comments. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add on that.
So I will. It's interesting that Syed talked about because I did put something to the side that was very important. Remember behavior based on where you fall, there are 8 factors. 6 of the 8 factors when you're under stress or pressure can result to you guys having imposter syndrome, fear, doubt, self-sabotaging, creating barriers, undervaluing yourself, etc. So they're going to make you sink in a maybe a pool of depression or something different. Whereas other people have those behavior factors where when stuff gets wrong or chaotic for them, they understand how to switch gears under that pressure because they're genetically wired to do that. And I think that that's what's very important, because a lot of people throw around imposter syndrome, and it doesn't irritate me, but I know from what I do that people, if you have imposter syndrome, and it can show up in any of those 8 factors, 6 of the 8, it can show up. If it's genetically wired like that, then how you make a decision about something that you're going through, like COVID, is going to be completely different than how a person like I would make a decision in the same situation.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
gotta let that marinate because I'm thinking about this. So, one person, because of the way that they respond or look at the situation, can get a whole different set of results or outlook. This other person, because of the way they're processing it based on their genetic behavior, they can end up. It actually is a positive for them.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, this is changing, but this change is good because I'm able to do this. Like Josh said, I'm able to do this other business that I didn't have before.
Yep.
Or you see some businesses have record years into the end of the pandemic. Now look, none of us are excited or happy about people losing their lives and getting sick and
No.
all that. So I don't want to make sure
Mm-mm.
that I'm putting that out there to the audience. We're not talking
Mhm.
about that. But we are talking about is how one person or two different people can look at the same event in a totally different light.
Absolutely. And again, that's why it's really important for people to understand genetically how they show up, especially when it's in their career and in their business, because you need to make sure like that you built for it. I know people say everybody can be an entrepreneur. I don't believe that at all. I think that some people are natural born entrepreneurs and some individuals have a lot of resistance in being one. Not that they can't be, but the journey looks a lot different. And I just say that they need
Absolutely.
to be sure that they sure, right? And a lot of times it starts with just knowing who you innately are.
I agree 100% because if you think about it, if everybody's an entrepreneur, who's going to be the employees? Who are going to work for the organization?
I
I mean, we
agree.
couldn't have. We got 328 million people in the U.S. Let's say 150 of them, 200 million can work. We can't have 200 million entrepreneurs.
Nope,
No, we would be
not
able.
at all.
We have trouble finding enough people to work for us now. We'd have some real trouble if everybody wanted to be an entrepreneur. So you're 100% correct. I love that. You're right. I think that sometimes because it's so what do you call it? It puts so much glory, glorified, so glorified that it makes folks want to do it that have no business doing the business. They shouldn't
Mhm,
be doing it. They should just be working for
mhm,
somebody because it doesn't play into what their strength is or what their desire is. Because not
mhm.
everybody wants not everybody wants to be unknowing of when their next paycheck's going to come.
Correct. And
They're
that's
not
what's
going to want.
detected in financial behavior, to know like, nah, I don't think that you're not, the risk is low. And, not that you can't do it. It's just, it's going to make you lose sleep at night. Not good, like legitimately. So really think about it and figure out, be honest with yourself. That's where it starts to make sure that you on the right track before you just start making these crazy decisions because everybody else is doing it.
So true. Let's see, Doctor Chabu. Good to see you. He's on today. He says, "Go,
What you
Cassandra."
Buna?
Yeah, he said, "Go, Cassandra." Nicole says, I'm not an entrepreneur. I commend those that are. Well, you know what? And I would turn this back. I commend those who are employees because
Me too.
without employees, I wouldn't have a business.
That's true.
So I
Me neither.
appreciate you. Carl says, Carl's here. Carl McIver. He says, what's the best way for highly creative people to encourage those that they work with that are not accustomed to tapping into their creative gene? So we try and pull creativeness out of our staff that isn't naturally creative, or should we let them
Well,
be who they are? What are your thoughts on that?
my thought is I deal with a lot of people who are anchored and it is like literally pulling teeth. And it's not fair to pull it from them because that means we're not accepting who they naturally are. So remember, this is
Ooh.
about behavior is not for employers to be like, oh, okay, well, Raleigh is cooperative in this. So we need to change that. It's not about change. It's about you accepting what they are and technically working with that to grow as a person and professionally within your business, not to change it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious what the audience thinks of that. Let me just see.
Yeah.
Look at that. See? They like it too. Okay, I got a couple of comments that just came in here.
Okay.
Hopefully, I answered your question, Carl. But that was a great question, Carl. By the way, because
Mhm,
I've actually
mhm.
had that same thought. Okay, Joshua says, "Oh yeah." Joshua says, "Yes, we always look for the positive in any situation." So he's genetically, his genetic behavior is he looks at things. What's the positives I can pull out of this? And I share that trait with Joshua.
Mhm.
But I also appreciate people like Syed on the team because they give me a different viewpoint, a different way of thinking
Mhm.
about the same
Mhm.
subject that I didn't think about. It's a blind spot for me because I'm always thinking positive, 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 which is great. But there are some things, times I need to acknowledge what the truth and reality of the situation is.
Yep.
Okay. Nicole says, I've loved this conversation. She says, I want to
Mhm.
know how to continue this journey. Unfortunately, I have to jump off to get on another call. Let's touch base, Cassandra, and I will start following you. Rollins, thanks so much for the real talk. All right. Well,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Nicole. Appreciate you. Okay, so she had
Yeah,
to go.
thank you. Okay.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Let's bring it home.
Okay.
Um, what are some thoughts for those who are thinking about perhaps learning what their genetic behavior is and taking that next step? What would you
So then,
suggest they do?
okay.
And then also we do have you tagged. We have your website tagged as well. So feel free. Go ahead and tell us what we should do.
So I really think that to do your behavior, you first have to be okay with being open to knowing who you really are. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that. But you have to be open with saying, I just kind of want to know who I am and how I'm making decisions in my life, and be open to seeing it revealed and it's a strength and it's nothing to be afraid of, and that it's going to help you to continue propelling towards where you want to be. So I would say on my website I give select options for if you're an employer or if you're an individual, of things that you can look at to do in order to really figure out who you are. So that's where it starts.
Love that. Love that. Okay, by the way, Carl says, I will take that advice, but when it's 12 a.m. and the project is due at 9 a.m., you better find that gene. Laugh out loud.
I love it.
Oh, goodness. No, I appreciate you. Thank you, Carl, for that. Thank you, Joshua, Nicole, all you guys. I mean, yeah, Joanne, Dr. Chabu, appreciate you. Everybody Enrique, who are on this today, really appreciate you. Thanks for you being on today, Cassandra. I really appreciate you giving your advice. And I'm just going to check in with another part of my audience to make sure they loved it too today. Look at that. See? They all love you. Every section of my audience love you today. So thank you very much for being on today.
Good. Thank you.
And we're going to let everybody go. We're going to say bye to everybody. I want you to hang on for just a moment before we cut off.
Sure.
Okay, so
All right.
bye, everyone. Thank you for coming
Bye.
today.
Thank you.
See you next week. I have a show next week. I don't know who we have.